Let's talk movies, everyone. I know what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking. Nate, your beautiful mustache is back. And to that I say, yes, it is. And you are welcome. But other than that, earth-shattering news, we are back at John's place.
John's appeared as well.
Yeah.
Until tomorrow morning.
I didn't realize that you were shaving the other ones, but this is the last episode we filmed here since Darkest Hour, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it was either Darkest Hour. We did Valkyrie before Darkest Hour.
We
so did.
We did. And we're back to you with yet another Vietnam movie. Very interesting, very famous Vietnam movie called Full Metal Jacket. Now, as you might have noticed, we have another guest with us. And you're probably guessing what kind of professional have you roped in here. We know that you like to bring in people who know things about the things you talk about. We bring in Gavin, the classics major, to talk about ancient movies. We brought in a baseball player to talk about the baseball movie, and now
the politician to talk about the political movie.
The politician to talk about the political movie. That was a fun episode. You should watch it. And now we have Noah Parker, who just got home from Marine boot camp. Would you like to introduce yourself, Noah?
Yeah, so I'm Noah Parker, 17 years old, from Monticello, Florida, and I decided young I wanted to be a Marine, and I committed to that, and just a week ago, graduated from boot camp, and now headed to North Carolina, started my career.
There you go. Which
awesome.
And the fact that you just went through Marine boot camp is important. Is important because we were reviewing.
I already said Full Metal Jacket.
Okay, my bad. Sorry.
Yeah, Full Metal Jacket is famous for its Marine boot camp section at the beginning of the movie, and we're gonna dig into that. As you know, we're gonna get some insight from Noah Parker here. It's not gonna be an episode you're gonna want to miss. But first, John.
Yep.
You want to hit us with the specs?
So we'll talk about the premise of the movie first, as we usually do. So this movie is about, as Nate said, it's about Vietnam. Mm-hmm. It's set during the 1960s. I'd imagine it starts probably 66, 67, because they're fighting.
Speculation,
because they're fighting in the section that takes place in Vietnam is definitely in 68, because that's when the Tet Offensive was. So it's in the late 1960s. America's been involved in the Vietnam War, and it takes us right off the bat to Parris Island, South Carolina, where this dude just got back from. Where this is the depot, one of the two depots. I believe the other one's in San Diego. That's like where the people from the West go, right?
Cape Middleton.
Okay, yeah. And so, so it starts out in Parris Island, South Carolina, the Marine Recruit Training Depot, and it's this new platoon of Marines has come in, and they are getting trained to be Marines, obviously, and they know that they'll obviously be eventually sent to Vietnam, more than likely, after they finish, and they have this brutal senior drill instructor named Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, and probably the best character in the movie, and by far.
Definitely.
And great performance by the guy Arlie Ermey, who actually also voiced the in Toy Story, the Captain Soldier.
Really?
Same guy.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, so they have this brutal Gunnery Sergeant Hartman guy that's in charge of their platoon, and so the first half of the movie follows this platoon through the 8-week training, although now we know it's 13 weeks. But back in the 1960s, apparently it was 8 weeks. And so it follows them through that training. It focuses on these two Marines or recruits named Joker. Affectionate, kind of their nicknames are Joker and Pile. They're kind of they're the guys that we see the training kind of through the eyes of. And unfortunately, one of them goes down a path that is not too good. Yep. Things happen. The other one, Joker, graduates and is sent to Vietnam as a journalist. And the second half of the movie then follows Joker and his kind of assistant photo guy, Rafterman, as they are in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive. They're sent out to, originally they're writing for the Stars and Stripes newspaper, then they're sent out to cover the Battle of Hue, where they actually end up participating in the battle. Mm-hmm. And so, that's what this movie is about, and we'll do a few of the specs now, as we usually do. So, I think it's important to note, this movie was, and I mentioned this to Nate and Noah before, this movie is directed by one of the premier film directors of all time. Many film critics have called him the greatest film director of all time. His name is Stanley Kubrick. You might have heard the name. He died a long time ago, like 1999.
R.I.P. Stanley.
Yeah, we'll have a 5-second moment of silence. Alrighty. So this movie was directed by the great Stanley Kubrick. He did the other movies he did were The Shining, and he did obviously 2001: A Space Odyssey. Those are two that most people will have heard of. And then he did a handful of other movies that are now considered classics. He was one of those directors where a lot of his movies weren't realized for how great they were when they came out, and they achieved that critical acclaim later. And so, anyway, he died pretty young, actually, at age 70 in 1999. And before his last movie came out, it was like 2 months before his last movie came out. Anyway, he directed this movie, obviously, and the screenplay was written by Stanley Kubrick. He wrote almost all of his movies, or co-wrote. So, yeah, he wrote the screenplay.
As good directors do, I think.
Yeah, and I appreciate the more when directors write their own screenplays, because then it's not like they're just like picking out of the so-called the pot, so to speak. They're actually coming up with their own ideas. Anyway, Stanley Kubrick wrote the screenplay with Michael Herr and Gustav Hasford. It was based on the novel The Short Timers by Gustav Hasford, one of the screenwriters. And that book was about, obviously it was the same plot as the movie has, obviously. And an interesting thing, though, is that there was a lot of debate when they were making the movie over who would get screenwriting credit. I just read this somewhere. The author eventually obtained screenwriting credit, although he and Kubrick had a real real kind of bad relationship. They did not get along. And Kubrick, that's one thing about Kubrick. He did not get along with a lot of. He was kind of an abrasive guy. He was real eccentric and quirky, and he liked total control over his movies. And he did not get along well with this guy. But the Hasford did get a screenplay credit for the movie. And so and they changed the title of the book. The book was obviously called The Short Timers. From what I read, Kubrick wanted to change the name of the movie to The Full Metal Jacket because he thought that people would think that the movie was about like guys who like quit their jobs early or something if they kept the title of the book. And that kind of makes sense, The Short Timers, yeah. So we changed it to a very war type of movie name, Full Metal Jacket. So yeah, the movie was also produced by Stanley Kubrick on his own.
Nice.
It stars Matthew Modine, Adam Baldwin, Vincent D'Onofrio, Lee Ermey, Dorian Harewood, Arliss Howard, Kevin Major Howard, and Edo Ross. A few of these names you'll might know. Vincent D'Onofrio, who plays Private Pyle, starred in Jurassic World.
Interesting.
He plays the guy that he wants to like take control of the dinosaurs for bad reasons,
Right.
and he gets eaten at the end by one of the Tyrannosaurus Rexes. Or not Tyrannosaurus, Velociraptors.
Yeah.
He plays that guy, and then apparently Matthew Modine or Modine, I don't know how you say it, Matthew Modine or Modine. He also starred in Oppenheimer which came out last year.
I saw it from the beginning, and I was like, bro, that's
he plays one of the scientists in Oppenheimer, apparently. And then, like I said, Arlie Ermey was the voice of the soldier captain in Toy Story, and his character is legendary. Cinematography was by Douglas Milsome. It was edited by Martin Hunter. The music was by Abigail Mead. The production companies was Natant, Harriet, and Harrier Films. It was distributed by Warner Brothers in the U.S. and in the United Kingdom by Columbia Canon. And it'll be interesting to talk about. This movie was filmed a lot in England. It was actually all filmed in England because Stanley Kubrick did not like filming in the U.S. He got tired. After his first few films, he got tired of all the problems he was having making his movies because of censorship laws and stuff, and he thought that the censorship laws were more lenient in the UK, so he just moved there. He lived there for the rest of his life, and he made all of his movies there. And so it was released on June 17th, 1987 in Beverly Hills. That was the premiere. And then it went wide on June 26th, 1987 in the U.S., and on September 11th, 1987 in the UK.
On September 11th?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
But this is in 1987, so obviously it wouldn't have been weird.
My bad.
But it has a running time of just under 2 hours at 116 minutes. It was a co-production between the United Kingdom and the United States. I think there was a U.S. production company on it, but they filmed everything in England. And the language, obviously, in the movie is English. It had a budget of between $16.5 and $30 million, so not too big.
That's a huge range.
Yeah,
though.
no, yeah, I know. I don't know. I can't.
Not sure how much money they spent.
I couldn't find a definite amount. So yeah, between $16.5 and $30 million. But we do know how much it brought in. It brought in $120 million. So it
Which
made back
is more
its
than
point.
either of those numbers. Yeah.
It is more. Yep.
Yeah,
at least
more.
$90 million more dollars.
Basic math. We can do this.
Yep. Anyways, yeah, those are kind of some of the specs. So,
Nice.
do we want to go ahead and get into this
Let's
review?
start with the positive. So it is our tradition to let guests have the first positive. What's something you really like about this movie, Noah?
I really liked actually all the realism inside the boot camp aspect.
Yeah.
Because even though it was a lot different before, than when I went there were so many similarities though that I could see. I was like when you first see it and you see the roof of the squad bay, it's the exact same roof as it is when I went there.
Like 60 years later.
Yes, like the racks are the exact same. The sheets that you use are the exact same. There's small differences, like the windows are different, there's floor different, but the pillars are same. I really liked how they actually got everything right, and how this was still set in 1968, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be different, but there's also going to be similarities. Like the Rifleman's Creed has not changed a single bit. Mm-hmm. They did cut out a part of it because it's a whole long piece.
That might have been for runtime.
Yeah, for runtime, but they did cut out part of it.
They
but I
included
really
a lot
liked
of
that.
it.
Exactly, they really did. One part that I really did like was the how the drill instructors talk to them, and how one main thing about boot camp, it's basically like a comedy show you can't laugh at. That's how it is, and they try to make you laugh to keep your bearing, and your bearing is you not laughing, you having to stay serious all the time. So that I really liked about that, because there's a lot of good aspects, and especially with Pyle, how he was very every platoon has that one guy
who can't really,
just the guy who can't do anything right, who can't listen, learn, or anything. And it was good to know that I wasn't the only platoon with that. I heard it from other platoons, but it was interesting to see that even way back then.
So they captured that squad dynamic of how there's all the different types of people,
and especially that during the drill. The exact same corrections that they were making on them, they made on us. So even 80 years from that time,
that's crazy.
They're
not
4
80,
inches from the chest.
About 50.
Yeah, around there. About 4 inches from the chest. Stop moving your head around the weapon. All that kind of stuff. Exact same words that they would say to us. So that I really liked all the realism.
The realism in the first half of the movie.
100%.
And I wanted you also said that it was the realism was good in some of the Vietnam scenes when they were moving up.
Yes,
and when they were the movements they did. You said that was also pretty realistic to how it would actually how y'all were trained.
Yeah, in Way City, during the scene in Way City, they were moving forward and they were buddy rushing. So they would have one person go forward, and then while that person's forward, they're just looking straight forward. Usually, if they're under fire, they'd be suppressing fire, and then they move forward and replace them to keep going to move forward, so there's constant suppression. And I saw that in there, and I was like, it's crazy how we use that from back then still now, because we know it works. And that I really like too.
Yeah, and I would
they abandoned that principle at the end of the movie, and they just send one guy out.
Yeah, we can talk about that in the negative.
That might be the more unrealistic.
But I've got tons of questions, but I'd love to circle back on.
Yeah, we can because we have that section where we'll talk all about your experience
when we get into the history section
and how it compares to what it was back then. So, you want to go next?
First positive. No, come back to me. I was listening.
Okay, cool. So I'll just bump off of you real quick and talk a little bit about the realistic aspects that I really enjoyed. And I've done a little bit of research and I've watched some reactions by Marines to this movie and to specifically the first part of the movie, and they all say that it's it's about as realistic as they could have done, and with the how they have the depiction of Marine boot camp. And obviously, I think one reason it was so realistic is because they actually got a real drill instructor to play the drill instructor.
Yeah.
And Arlie Ermy was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps, and he brought all of that to the role. And he literally apparently ad-libbed the majority of his insults that he makes,
100%.
And you can tell because they sound like you were saying some of them are things that they would say to y'all.
100%.
Which is just so cool. So I love, and I'll get into his performance and when I talk about the acting, because I really liked his performance in general. But yeah, just the realism. I echo everything he said. It was really cool. They got all the little details, and it's pretty cool that they filmed it in England and were still able to kind of recreate that Paris Island feel.
You would have thought that they would have filmed that on Paris.
Yeah, I know. They did a really good, impressive job of making wherever they were, whatever studios or places they were filming in England look like South Carolina.
Although it is funny because his insistence in filming only in the UK is probably why there was just a bunch of urban battle scenes.
I've also read that too.
Because I was like, where's the jungle?
That's going to be
the jungle.
That is true, yeah. I mean, Way City was fought in the city of Way, but we'll talk about that in the negatives. But so anyway, on to my first big positive. I really enjoy the screenplay, and there's a part of the screenplay I think that could have been better, but there's part of it that's really good, and that's the dialogue. And it's like really punchy, and like the insults by the drill instructor are just like crazy. And like I said, he ad-libbed a lot of it, so some of it might not actually be attributed to the screenplay, but they did write a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the insults as well. And he just went off of that and took it to the extreme. But I think that there's a lot of really just dialogue in this movie that feels like it's what Marines would say. Like, it's just kind of random topics they'll start talking about. Like, there's a scene like where they're cleaning the head and they just start talking about like I don't even know if I should say what they say, but they're just talking about random like sexual things.
I was about to ask a question about it, but I was is that although we have the Alexander episode, in that episode I had to flag that on YouTube because like
there's just scenes where Marines are saying stuff that feels like Marines would really be saying like when they just aren't being watched and like when they're just kind of chilling out. Like in Vietnam, there's several scenes that are kind of seem pretty realistic where it's just like street hookers are trying to like solicit them, and then it's like you think that they react in ways that like you think they would react. It feels realistic, and the dialogue is just good throughout the movie. There's a lot of good dialogue about like the duet. There's a lot of good themes. There's a few good themes they hit on, but that's also going to be one of my negatives. I think there could have been more themes they hit on, but a few of the good ones that I really enjoyed that came out in the screenplay were the I'll save that for themes since we're going to talk about this earlier. But anyway, just to sum up this positive, the dialogue in the movie is really good. It feels like a military dialogue. And once again, I think they got all of the kind of like military, like the way they would say, like the way the drill instructors would address the troops. I think that was pretty realistic, and that was accurate.
An aspect that this was way back then. 8 weeks instead of 13 weeks. And even though it went from 8 weeks to 6 months to 13 weeks, so there's a whole aspect of that that you have to take in perspective.
I really enjoyed also some of the colorful dialogue when the journalists are all talking around the table. That was really interesting how they were just like, they were all like wanting to like, they were kind of like, they did not obviously like the dude that was in charge of them because he wanted them to like write fake stories and stuff. And they were like just taking jabs at him in the most like lowball way, kind of. That was really cool. So I really like the dialogue. The screenplay is really juicy in this movie for the most part. Now it does lack on some themes, which is going to be a negative, but the screenplay in general is pretty good.
Yeah. So I only really have two things that I really enjoyed about this movie. You could maybe slice them into three things, but number one is the drill instructor. This guy just like carries the movie. He is just it's so fun to watch him. I'm sure you enjoyed that even more than I did. Just watching him just absolutely rat out these people, and he, like, I swear he was not acting. He was just being himself.
100%.
He was just being himself, and he was just such a joy to watch. So he carried the movie. Two is the production quality of the movie was really good. The scenes in the bombed out cities was really well put together. All of their equipment looked great. The M56 Pattons, which was one of my favorite model of tank, actually looked super cool. Although when they fired the gun, that did look a little bit fake. Yeah, but other than that, the tanks looked great. I love that they used practical effects instead of trying to animate anything. Although, when did this movie come out?
87.
Yeah, so never mind. That's not a positive. They couldn't have animated anything. but still, I enjoyed it. So I'd say
they could have used like the Star Wars. Star Wars could come out in the 70s and 80s. I mean, they could have done something.
But they redid the graphics.
But I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, I'm glad they did. So I'd say the production quality was great. The drill instructor was great, and then the battle scenes were fun to watch.
Yeah,
it was fun.
I'll bounce off you with the battle scenes real quick because I really enjoyed, especially the battle scene when they're doing the buddy run. I thought that was my favorite combat scene. I really enjoyed the one at the end as well, though. But I think what was the best part of the battle scenes is just like it's not like them trying to like it's nobody just goes on like rampages. It's kind of just like they're all trying to give cover fire. It feels very restrained, kind of like in Platoon. I think both of these movies wanted to go for more realistic battle scenes than like cheesy Hollywood battle scenes, and I think that was the right direction to go because it feels more like what the combat would have actually been like. It's not like guys are like just like wiping out dudes. Like it's a big deal when they kill like 2 Viet Cong. It's like
one Viet Cong girl.
It's like that's like a massive deal. But also that one dude, he shoots the guys that run out of the building, and it's like, wow, we just killed some of them. Let's party.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm gonna have to do a negative on the battle scenes too. There's problems I have with them.
I do. One of them is the slow mo, but anyway,
we can talk about that later.
Yeah. So Noah, do you have another positive about maybe the second part of the movie?
Or if not, we can move on to negatives.
I have a couple more.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna be I have more positives than I think Nate will.
I didn't enjoy this movie as much as John did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay, I'll go and get if you just want to bounce off me or anything. So yeah, the performance. I'll just echo your thoughts. The performance of the drill instructor is amazing. 10 out of 10.
Just guess.
I mean, Arlie Ermy carries the first part of this movie.
He's
just. I mean, he was a drill instructor, and so he appears to be a drill instructor in the movie. He doesn't have to sell it. He is a drill instructor.
Oh, yeah.
And which is just it's awesome. And I really just think that on the acting in general though, I think there were a couple other good performances in the first half of the movie. I think that Pyle is played really well. I think that actor did Vincent D'Onofrio. He did a really good job of portraying the psychological aspect of his character. I mean, his faces at the end at that halfway point can seem kind of ridiculous. We have to think about this guy's like messed up, and I thought it actually seemed pretty realistic. His transformation from being like this fat guy who everybody hates, he gets hazed, and then he kind of shapes up. But then at that point, he's totally messed up psychologically, and it's actually I think they actually could have done even more with it, which is going to be my negative on how they didn't. There were things in this movie that they could have hit on more that they didn't, and so but I think his acting performance was good. He really portrayed the emotions of that character really well. He doesn't even have a lot of dialogue. A lot of his acting is in his face, and I thought that actor did a really good job. And then the guy who plays Joker, Matthew Modine, he also is good. He's not like amazing or anything. I mean, nothing compared to like the drill sergeant, but he does a good job of like. He's kind of just like the jokester. Obviously, his name's Joker. He's kind of just like the standard dude that would have been from like coming over to fight in Vietnam, kind of. Mm-hmm. He's just kind of that kind of just random Joe type of guy, and he plays his role well. I think he's good. He's not like outstanding or anything. He's fun. And then there's some other good side characters that come up. Animal Mother is a real interesting character. He's this kind of real hard nosed, like let's kill all the VC type of guy that they meet once they get to Vietnam, and he's actually played by the same guy he was in The Patriot. He plays one of the colonial turncoat, but he's a real interesting character, and I think that actor did a good job of like he portraying this guy who's like kind of crazy, but also there always has to be that crazy dude in war movies who's like crazy but like actually knows what they're doing.
The war crime guy.
And so he does a good job. And a really small minor character that did a really good job was the gunner on the helicopter, who's like literally insane. He's just like killing innocent civilians, and he just like with his dialogue and his acting, he just like you really buy the fact that this dude's like screwed.
Yeah.
And you do not want to think about what happens to that guy when he goes back to America.
Yeah.
Because like that dude could seriously kill some people. Like that guy could have become a murderer.
I mean, he was a murderer.
He already was. You do not. I mean, you don't want to think about what happened to him when he goes back to America, and that was good. That's because of the acting. He did a good job, and that's just like a 5-minute scene. He was really good. So the acting was pretty solid. And then I have one more. So did you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I have one thing.
Okay.
What was the name of that one dude during the sniper battle scene that became the squad leader?
Oh, Cowboy.
Yeah, Cowboy. So that's one positive I really liked, that it showed how people mess up. Mm-hmm. Even the Marines, they mess up. And that Cowboy, he was not being a good. He was called to be a squad leader. Mm-hmm. He tried to lead. You would see him there being like, all right, we're staying here, waiting for this tank. We're doing this. So he's leading, but he's not leading well at all whatsoever. And I can see it. Like, they're randomly getting shot at, and then they just start firing. There's like, ceasefire. Mm-hmm. We're going to wait for a tank. We're going to, it was not good. What he was doing. But since they were portraying him as that, that was a really positive note for me, especially when, was it Animal?
Animal Mother.
Yeah, he came up and he stood up. He's like, I don't care about this. You're not leading this well. You're not doing this. I'm going to actually do something. Because you literally put 2 of your men in jeopardy. Now they're over there and getting killed, and you're not doing anything about it. You just want us to sit here. And that I really liked how they showed that, because that actually happens.
Yeah. I think that I'll bounce off you real quick. I think that in that final battle scene, there is some a little bit of emotional payoff. Like when Cowboy dies, like he's this dude who just messed up, but yet you still feel really bad that he got killed because you kind of gotten to know him across the movie. He's been throughout the whole movie, and it could have if they had kind of hated, it could have been like, oh yeah, it doesn't really matter that he died, but you still feel that emotion because they all like were so close with him, and I really like how like I like the way that the relationship between Joker and that squad was, where he's kind of like the outsider, and then you have this platoon that's been together for a long time, and like I really like that aspect of how Joker kind of has to like earn his way into the platoon, and he never really does, which I think is realistic. Like a Marine, he couldn't just come in and like become part of the boys. Yeah, you know, like
it's hard because when we would have a drop from another platoon come into our platoon, it would be, or from another company, we only had one that actually made it, and he actually became our guide and the honor graduate.
Oh, nice.
But we had 4 or 5 others. Every single one, they never really fit in. They were bad at performing. It was just like, you're just a drop. You're not even part of this, and now you're setting us back. That's a lot of the times what it is. But they're like Joker, he was pitting them up there. He was helping them, and I felt like that was that one guy in our platoon that actually was,
I guess he did kind of earn he earned their respect at the end, especially. I think you're right, actually. And how he actually is the more respectful guy, more kind of like the guy you kind of respect more, because he actually mercy kills him. All the other ones just wanted to let the girl rot, the sniper that they kill at the end.
And they respected him for that.
Yeah, I know, and so I think that I have 2 more cool positives that I'll go on real quick. One of them is that I think this movie did a good job of portraying some of like the horrors and like the kind of insanity of war through mainly through the dialogue and through like some of the characters in the second half of the movie, because obviously the first half of the movie is more just in America, so they're not in a war yet, but the second half has some moments that are really good and portray the horrors of war. One of them is, and there's just several, one of them is when there's just this guy that he's killed this Viet Cong guy, and he gives this really weird kind of messed up speech. Obviously he's kind of messed up as a guy, as a character, and he's like talking about he's like, hey, this is our bro. We're having the party for him. He's just this dead goop that they had killed. And there's just some other scenes that really like kind of disturb you and make you feel like kind of like uneasy about all this. And you really get a sense that these soldiers are like kind of psychologically messed up. And that's a tribute to the acting too. I thought a lot of the side characters actually were pretty well acted. And but you really get a sense of kind of that kind of just uneasiness and like, man, what's going on over here isn't good, you know. It's not a good thing. It needs to, but at the same time you understand that like they're also fighting to kind of help people, and like, so it's like it's a good cause, but also like these guys are messed up, and it's also really scary what's going on. And my last big positive is the cinematography and like how this movie is shot. I think Stanley Kubrick is amazing at cinematography in all his movies, and he just like there's so many different like angles of scenes that you get, and there's so many great, like specifically in the battle scenes, there's a lot of great tracking shots, like in the Buddy Run scene, or is that what it's called, Buddy Rush. In the Buddy Rush scene, it's kind of tracking them as they go up. There's a lot of cool shots where it's just tracking them as they maneuver through the city and through these burned down buildings. And in the first half of the movie, there's an awesome scene, right? A shot at the beginning whenever they're showing them at sunset climbing the ropes and doing the obstacle course. That shot was amazing. And then just a couple others that stood out. Obviously, the opening scene of the movie, not the haircutting scene, but the first scene with the gunnery sergeant, it's just tracking. It's like right in front of him, and it's just following him, and he's walking towards the camera giving his little rant and everything, and that was just really cool. Stanley Kubrick is known for doing shots of people as they walk towards the camera, and he uses it a good bit in this movie, and I think the shots are really cool. And also there's the iconic shot, probably the most famous shot in the movie, of when it's right after he punches Joker and Joker's down, and he's like, "You will not laugh, you will not cry," and it's the camera's is showing his face. That's like the most iconic shot of the movie. So there's just there's a really wide variety of cinematography that's used in this movie, and like types of shots, angles of shots, and I think it's quite diverse, and I think it's a big positive of the movie. And